So today, yeah, it's funny because right now I'm writing my story. I'm trying to turn it into a book, and I'm getting to the part where I'm talking about jealousy, and I thought, what better time than now to make a video all about jealousy and my experiences and the absolute worst things I've had to deal with regarding to jealousy and everything. And I'm about to tell you stuff that is very embarrassing to me, so it's like it's going to be very hard for me to admit this, but anyway. So a lot of times I feel like my negative self-image has to do with parts of what happened to my childhood, and because I've had that insecure attachment and kind of thing like that, where I just feel like it's like my base thought is that people are going to leave me, they won't find me interesting or anything like that, and it kind of makes you think in a very horrible, toxic way. And I'm just checking to see if okay, anyway, what I find is when I was younger, my jealousy was 1,000 times worse. And it's so bad that I'm gonna have a really hard time admitting this because this is so embarrassing. I hope she never sees this, but anyway, I was actually jealous of my sister-in-law. Like, this is so freaking embarrassing because of how ridiculous this whole thing is. So when I was younger, a little bit of backstory, I basically just was put in the care of a very abusive biological father, and because of that, I developed this really negative self-esteem kind of thing where, because I was also sometimes compared to him, like when I would have anger outbursts, I'd be compared to him in some way. So I kind of grew up feeling like, oh, I must be this really ugly or really horrible. So that's been my, like, core mindset for the past, like, I'd say that it's only the past 5 to 6 or 7 years that I've kind of been slowly getting out of that mindset. But before then, that was always been my mindset, is that I must be really, really horrible or something like that. And believe me, it's not how you, like, you're not always destined to feel that way. So if you feel that way right now about yourself, it's definitely possible for you to change. It just takes like a lot of thinking. It really does take a lot of work, but it can be done. So I'm living proof of that. So I'll get onto how I got there. But right now I'm just going to tell you just about how awful this jealousy was. So besides the fact that I had this absolute horrible, like, scarcity mindset that anyone else being better than me in anything would mean that I suck and I shouldn't even bother. So whenever, like, if this is so strange, but if I hear someone, like, laughing to someone on the phone, I actually feel stupid or horrible, like I'm boring and uninteresting. I know, like, maybe it's something that it's hard to admit and you never want to actually share it because it just sounds really bad, or like it sounds like you're so whatever, but it's the truth. That's just how I felt for so many years, and sometimes even now I still have those feelings, but I have to work very hard to overcome them, because it's like your mind is in that horrible mindset that anyone is a threat because of what your experience is, that you've had these negative experiences in your childhood, to say that people can be unreliable. They, like, maybe caregivers would just go, or like ditch or whatever. Like, you've had these experiences and your mind's telling you, hey, like, be careful, people aren't reliable, you gotta actually be careful. Like, if anyone's better than you, they're gonna snatch them away, like snatch the person you care about away. That's like what your mind is trying to say. I get that. So now I don't fight the jealousy anymore to the point where I'm like, oh, like, jealousy. I accept, yes, I'm going to get jealous of silly things because of my experience. And if you feel that way, it's totally fine. Like, I feel like we shouldn't, like, put ourselves down because we get jealous. I mean, like, if people mock you because of it, it's maybe they just don't understand. It's like, we're allowed to feel what we feel. It's really just how we deal with the situation that really matters. So one thing is, when I think about the jealousy, it's like I had this vision that that my sister-in-law would just come and take, it's like, oh god, it's just so embarrassing to say this, but I really was jealous that every time, like, they were on the phone, I'd just be like, oh my god, this is the reason why I suck. Like, that was my mindset for so many years. And then guess what happened? A little person called Lucas changed everything. And that's why I really want to get into the detail of how he did that, because it's so interesting. So for a long time I had this mindset, because I must be like unattractive or ugly or something, then I suck, and because of that I'm uninteresting or anything like that. That was my mindset for a long time, and that's what I felt. So I just felt like, oh, people are gonna look for a reason to want to leave, or want to like think that I'm not as good as what they originally thought. Maybe like when they originally met me, they thought I was different, and now like they know the truth, they're going to like obviously not want to be around me anymore. That was my thought, right? And then I had Lucas, and what I noticed was that he is very, very attached to me in a way that no human being has ever been. And what I mean by that is he wants me around. He loves it when I'm upstairs with him at night. He always like comes to me, and he likes to sit on my lap, and it's just so cute. He's just like a typical little kid who's attached to his mummy, and I think it's the most adorable thing. And I just remember, like, even when he was like, it started like when he was a baby, he was very, very attached, and then it never went away. He still like comes to me for everything. I just remember that one time where he had like maybe like his hand was a little bit sore or something, and he just came to me and showed me his hand. It was just the cutest thing in the world. And I kept wondering, like, what made him, or what makes him just come to me regardless of whatever. Like, what makes him so attached to me when I, in my own mind, thought that I had nothing to offer? Like, I had to really think about this, because he obviously had a really huge attachment to me. And I have to think, like, okay, like, he wants to be around me no matter what. Like, he doesn't care if I have, like, a face full of pimples. He doesn't care if I'm looking horrible that day. He doesn't care if I'm smelling, whatever it is that we usually are self-conscious about. Like, oh my god, I look so bad today. It's like I can't go out, can't freaking show my face because how bad I look, right? But Lucas doesn't care about any of that. He just unconditionally wants me near him and just wants me close. And I had to really think about that. It's like, I had to think about why that is. It's like, okay, so obviously it has nothing to do with physical features, right? It has nothing to do with the way I look, because obviously, like, I look different day to day. And then I thought, oh, right, maybe it's because I do my best. Like, I'm not perfect, but I do try my best to make him, shower him with affection, with love, and make him feel safe and happy. And that's what I really try to do, because I just really can't stand, like, the idea of, like, him going through anything of close to what I went through. So I do my best. I'm not always proud of certain like times where I might just lose my cools and stuff, but I do try my best. So I'm very happy that I try my best. But what I've always tried to do since he was a little baby is just shower him with as much affection as I can. Like the way my grandfather did for me when I was younger, because growing up my grandfather was everything to me. He was the one that I always wanted to be close to, and it's really just because he was so kind to me. He really was the nicest person ever, that he never got, like, he never punished me. He was just such a kind person that he really took me places, and he was just amazing. So I try my best, even though sometimes I feel like I don't do as well as I want to, but I do try my best. And I feel like maybe Lucas can sense that. So because he knows how much I care for him and how much I love him, then he feels the same way. So that is a very good example to why sometimes our jealousy is just in the wrong place. We're thinking about the wrong thing. It's like we have this idea that, oh, if we are not good enough, we don't look good enough, we don't say the most interesting thing, then people are gonna like really hate us or something. Like we have this mindset, that like this jealous mindset that other people will be better than us. But my son has taught me something very important, and that is like how I make him feel matters over anything else. So like, because I try my best to make him feel loved and just safe and at home, you know, like I always like you know, just like try to make him, like just try to speak to him in a very nurturing voice as much as I can, like, and then he really responds so much to it, to the point where like he just, like, I'll always remember like at night when we all go upstairs, he just wants me to stay upstairs, and he won't like me going down for anything unless he's asleep. Then he wouldn't know, obviously. So a lot of times I'll stay up there with him in the room until he's asleep. Then I'll come down to do all my work on the computer or whatever if I have time, because sometimes he'll sleep very late and other times he'll sleep early, so it really depends. But anyway, but I do notice that he just really wants me not near him, and it's really sweet. I just think, oh, like, oh, how sweet that he just always wants me close by. And that is probably one of the biggest things that has taught me something very important, and that is that sometimes you just don't have to worry about all these things that you're worried about. It really is just how you're making the other person feel is like how important you are to them. So instead of like overthinking of how you're looking that day or whether you're humorous enough, because they're all things that I've thought of, like, oh, it's like if you think about how ridiculous it sounds that someone else laughing in front of, like, on the phone talking to someone else, like, how does that mean that you're not interesting? Because I bet there are times when they're laughing with you as well, but it's just like your mind is just trying to like force the idea that the person must be thinking of a way to run away from me or something like that. It's very difficult. I agree. It is just such a difficult thing to overcome, and it takes a lot of time. I find that for anything for your mind to actually change the way it's thinking, it requires a lot of patience and time. And it's not something that you can just click a finger and have your mind change differently. That's just something I've learned. And what I find very, very important is once I understand it, I have to like keep telling myself, repeat to myself. I have to keep remembering why I think that. And it's hard because your mind will always go back to the previous idea or this thought. So yeah, one of the things that I know I am really good at that I don't do is that I don't go and seek out stuff that I know is going to make me jealous, because a lot of times I know people will like want to read text messages on their significant other's phones, or like, I don't know, anything like that. Like they just want to know. But for me, I actually think that is a very bad idea. I find that is like completely pointless, and that's not something that I ever recommend even thinking about, because sometimes ignorant really is bliss, that if you don't know about it, like this situation doesn't even occur. So like if you're in a situation that is gonna, like, is gonna cause you jealousy, what I like to do is really just to tune out of it altogether. So I'll take some headphones, put some loud music on, and just listen to stuff and tune out the noise that's going to cause me to feel a bit insecure. That's what really helps me. I find that sometimes you don't have to know everything. Like, knowing everything just really suck. Like, sometimes, like, why would they even have the phrase ignorant is bliss if, like, knowing everything is wonderful, right? Sometimes it's just better to not listen to a conversation if you know that conversation is going to make you feel a certain way. Just don't listen to it. I think it's very helpful, because a lot of times I find like, oh, you're going to be on the phone right now. I know that might be causing a little bit of insecurity in me. I'll just leave for a bit, or I just go somewhere. I don't ever want to like put myself through a situation where I'm forced to listen, but also at the same time, I'm not going to say to them, oh, you can't do this or that. I would never say that. I just say, you know what, if I know I'm gonna feel a certain way, maybe a little jealous or something, I'm gonna like leave, or I'm gonna put music on so I don't hear it, and that really just works so well for me. I find that that's one of my favorite methods of dealing with it, and it may seem like I'm running away from my problems, but at the same time, I know that I'm not gonna be able to just switch off the jealousy just because I want to. It takes a lot of time, repetition, and a lot of work. So it's like, in the meantime, if it can make life easy for you, why not? So that's what really, really works for me. And jealousy is just something that I've always had a hard time with, because I feel like jealousy and that scarcity mindset come very close together. Because if you've experienced life in a way that you didn't get a lot of stuff, like you always had to fight for the affection of someone that's close to you, or that you were placed in the care of someone who wasn't nice or something, you're going to just develop this horrible scarcity mindset, and that is that there is not enough love to go around. There's not enough abundance, that everyone else will take it from you. That's just going to be like the way you think because of your life experiences. Unfortunately, if you've had that negative life experience, especially if it's in your childhood, it is definitely going to be one of the worst effects of it. And sometimes I just envy the people who think that life is full of abundance and everyone's not going to affect me. I would love to think like that, but I also understand that certain experiences that I've had has shaped my mind into the way it does, but that doesn't mean that it cannot be changed. I find it's very helpful for me by listening to people who actually believe that the world is abundant, to talk about it repeatedly. That's something that really helps me, that if I listen to a podcast of someone who's talking about how like nobody is taking away anything from you, if I just listen to that over and over, like every day I can listen to that for like 20 minutes a day or half an hour or an hour or whatever that like I can fit my time in. If I listen to that over and over, I do find that my mind starts to change a little, and I think it takes a lot of time and repetition to actually really change it to the point where you just think that in the beginning, but it can still work. So I recommend, if you ever know anyone that speaks in a very positive way, that talks about how life is all abundant and like nobody's taking any, I do listen to that. Just even if you say it to yourself, if like sometimes maybe you can record your own video about talking about like just going against your own beliefs, and then you can play it back for yourself, because that's very important. Like I think it's very important to like listen to yourself and hear what you say, because sometimes you forget that you are also someone very interesting to listen to, and when you're not used to listening to yourself, it's very awkward and weird, and it might just make you feel like you cringe at your own thoughts. But when you get used to it, it's much easier and more fun to listen to yourself. So sometimes I even like to listen to some of my videos and hear what I have to say, because it's just interesting. Because like, as long as I can get through the hurdle of like, oh my god, this is how I sound, or this is what I look like, because once you get used to it, it's much easier. And that just helps me a lot, because one of the people I love to listen to the most is Gary Vee. He really is someone who I feel like has changed my life in such a positive way because of the way he thinks. He's had the experience that makes him think in such a positive way that it's such a breath of fresh air that I love playing his videos over and over and over. Honestly, I feel like his videos are the solution to all life's problems. It's so funny that I just really do feel that way. It's so nice to listen to it. I just find even putting an hour on, I will go from feeling like, oh, maybe I can't do this, to, oh, I can achieve anything. Like, that's just the power of positivity, the power of like listening to someone who gets it, who really has that positive mindset, will change everything for you. And you then end up thinking like, that's so right. Like, what? Like, it's that person, whoever that's better than you, or you think is better than you, they're not taking anything away from you. I mean, there's always enough love in the world. Like, I don't believe that. Yes, it's true that things might be competitive, but I do feel like if you're just automatically thinking, oh, because someone else is good, that means you suck, then that's a really, really toxic mindset, and your mind needs to go like waste itself in toxicity. No, I mean, like, it needs to detoxify itself, like go on a toxic thing or something. I don't know, like what do you call detoxification? It needs to go on a journey to detoxify itself. Like, I don't know, take some freaking green tea, whatever, or something. I don't know, just, you know what I mean? Like, you need to actually detoxify your mind, because it's thinking in a way that is not healthy for you to think. And if you go down the path of always just feeling jealous, and then people are going to find reasons to leave you or hate you and stuff, that's just going to make everyone also around feel really, really bad. Because a lot of times, if you think about it from the other person's point of view, you think about this person that you care about. Imagine if all day they just said, oh, you must hate me, you must suck. Like, imagine hearing someone that you really care about always talking so negative about themselves, and about how it seems like they know how you're feeling when you are the one who's in control of your thoughts, right? So like, it just, sometimes that's something that's very important for you to imagine, is that what if, like, think about the person that's very important to you, what if all day they told you that, oh, here, there's proof that you don't like me after all. Like, imagine if that happened. It might just make you feel really like, just like, oh, why even bother? Like, why even bother trying to prove that I like them since they don't believe it anyway? So I do feel like it's important to really do believe the person when they say that they care or something, that they're not just making it up. And it's hard. I understand how hard it is, because even I do that a lot, where I'm always like looking for an excuse or a reason why they must not want to talk to me or something like that. I'd be, it's just something that it's like they'll say something, right? And you hear this a lot in my videos but I turn it into more of a joke, because I know it's like I'm half serious, half joking, so that it's like a lighthearted situation. We kind of try to make it lighthearted, so that it's not like a serious argument sort of conversation. It's more of a lighthearted joke that, it's like acknowledgement that I feel this way, but I'm not going to allow it to control me. That's kind of what we're going with, is just joking about it and making it turn into more of a light-hearted thing rather than something serious that we're arguing over. And I find that one of the best things to deal with jealousy is really just being aware of it, because when you're aware of your jealousy, it's much easier to deal with, rather than, like, imagine if you're able to communicate with your significant other about your jealousy or the origin of your jealousy, instead of actually accusing them of maybe like hating you or something. Like, imagine if you're accusing them, it'll just turn out to be this argument. Like, they'll try to fight back and you'll try to like accuse, it'll just be this big argument, right? But if you're actually able to turn the conversation into, oh, I'm jealous because of this thing happened to me. Like, let's think of a way to help my jealousy. I just feel like that conversation is so much more productive, and it actually like makes it just much easier, and you don't have to deal as much with like the argument side of it, because you're kind of knowing, okay, I know I'm jealous. I know that the other person also knows that you're jealous, so it makes it so much easier. That's what I do a lot these days, is like, we are very aware of my jealousy, and that I will talk about it rather than just say, oh, see, there you go. Like, well, I do that, but it's more of a joke, so yeah, anyway. But yeah, I just find that very useful. Like, jealousy is just something that is a byproduct of insecurity, a byproduct of feeling like you're inferior, and that has a lot to do with your past. A lot of times I will deal with what I call core shame. That's like a feeling I've had since I was a really young kid, and unfortunately what I see that is like a feeling that you're wrong rather than your actions. So instead of feeling like, oh, what you're doing is incorrect or something, you just feel like you are not worthy to exist or something like that. So it's kind of like a really, really horrible way that your mind is trying to warn you, okay, maybe people are just unpredictable, you have to be careful, like nobody like will want to see you around, so you kind of get overly attached and overly what's the word, where you're really, really paranoid that they're going to leave. A lot of times I see that in other people as well, and I know that can be one of the biggest problems with a relationship, is when you feel paranoid that, oh, they're going to run away with like someone that's more attractive, right? That's what you're thinking all the time. And that's what I mean, is that you have to acknowledge or understand where that feeling is coming from, rather than see it as something that they have to do to accommodate you by like not, talking to certain people or whatever. You have to see it as, okay, this is something that I'm dealing with. I have to figure out a way to manage it. I have to figure out a way. I'm dealing with jealousy and I hate that, but I have to figure out how to manage it. That's something that I have to remind myself to do all the time. And of course, with certain situations, you start to realize more and more about, like, for me, I just try to do my best. Like, whenever I'm jealous, I just kind of acknowledge it, and I will just, maybe if I'm really jealous, I'll be upset, but at the same time I know the other person knows that about my jealousy, so we often just will discuss about it or laugh about it and turn it into something funny. And that's really worked well, because I can tell you, in the beginning of the relationship I was crazy jealous, and then every single like jealous outburst turned into an argument that really just ended up really bad. And then you know, it's like those are kind of the arguments that eventually is what actually turns the significant other off from, like, you know, all this joy and happiness. It could be the reason why they end up just not wanting to be around because of this jealousy. It's like, imagine if every time you see a person, all this negative feelings stir up and you just have to deal with all this jealousy, then of course it's going to, like, make you almost want to keep a distance, right? So that's why I try to remember that. And I try to just tell myself, if I'm jealous, I'm definitely not going to make them do something because of my jealousy. I'm not gonna, like, stop them from talking to who they want to. I'm not going to, like, interfere with whatever it is. I'm gonna just try to tune out myself. I'm gonna tune out myself if I can, and then just maybe, like, discuss it in a way that's more productive. That's really helps me. Sometimes the worst thing about jealousy is even when you're logically aware that you shouldn't be jealous, like you shouldn't be jealous of this person. Why are you jealous of your sister-in-law? Like, you're thinking about it, laughing about how silly it is, but at the same time, your jealousy is just there. Like, it's like you can't get rid of it. And then you're just thinking, like, am I crazy? Why am I jealous of, like, why? And then it's just so frustrating. I understand that. I've been there, believe me. And it's totally, like, completely, like, understandable that you're jealous because really it's just like you're so insecure about yourself. And I find that in the past when I used to have, like, you know, be at school and stuff, a lot of, like, jealousies also happen at school, I find, because what also ends up happening is that I'd have a really good friend, right? I always had, like, one friend that I felt like I was really close to, I connected with, that I was chatting with, that I enjoyed the company of. But that friend usually has other friends. But that other friend, the problem is I don't really know that other friend very well. And usually the other friend would be maybe, like, they met somewhere else, or they're really close friends to begin with. And what ends up happening is I develop this, almost like this negative vibe towards the other friend. And of course the other friend would develop some kind of negative vibe towards me, because in a way we're both thinking, oh, like, the other person's gonna snatch my friend away, like, oh my god. Have you ever been through that? Because that's one thing that I always went through at school. Like, it was forever the thing. And the worst thing is the friend that we both were close to never really knew about it, so we spent the entire time just hating on each other secretly. It's like, you know that because later on you hear, like, you just get this weird vibe. Like, for example, I had a really good friend in high school that I was very close to. She had friends as well, but every single time me and the other friend were in the same class, what ends up happening is I feel like I was left out, and I felt like, oh, because of that, like, the friend wouldn't want to talk to me, because I wasn't interested in talking. It's like as soon as there's another person involved, I'm just like, why bother even trying? I'm just not going to say anything. So I end up being very quiet, and I think that friend picks it up. And then they would probably feel a little threatened by me, and I feel threatened by them, and all of a sudden we got this threatening, like, you know, we're all threatened of each other, and at the same time we've never actually even had the chance to talk to each other or get to know each other, and all we want to do is, like, snatch our friend away from the other person, right? That's just what I think about it. It just sounds so silly. Whereas if we had the courage to maybe tell the friend how we actually felt, and maybe had the friend, like, introduce us properly, or have us, like, no, get to know each other a bit more, maybe all of this would have been avoided. And I keep thinking, like, sometimes I've been very lucky too that I did have friends who were able to introduce people properly, and what's ended up happening is you become friends with that new person, and it's really nice because it feels like instead of, like, you have one less friend, it feels like you have an extra friend. And wouldn't that be much better or more abundant, like, feels more abundant than feeling like, oh, that friend is just snatching your best friend away, you know? It just feels like it's so much a better way to handle the situation. And sometimes it's really crazy, but the other person really doesn't know. Like, it's not like they just not aware of how you're feeling. And I know it's hard. I know how hard it is to reveal how you feel. That's one of the hardest things to do as a young person. I had a lot of trouble with that, like, to actually tell my friend how I felt, because there were times I remember I was invited to a party and just didn't feel comfortable, and I was just unable to tell her how I felt, and then and you know what happened was we had like this book of poetry that we wrote, right? So we would write poetry in the book, and so what ends up happening that we weren't able to tell each other how we felt was that she ended up just writing a poem in the book about how disappointed she was that I didn't actually attempt to make more friends with the people in the party. That's actually what happened. And then how I found out about it was reading the book. Because I was like, oh, it's my turn to write in the poetry book. And then the first poem I see is, oh, why didn't she do more? Do more in the party, and just like, why didn't she put more effort into getting to know people? I'm disappointed. You know, just stuff like that is just so silly. Like, you could have avoided all this argument, like, because this was what happened. And they ended up having a big argument about how rah, rah, rah. It's like, how dare you write about me in the poetry book instead of, like, you know, that just, it's like, just thinks about, like, if you were able to actually be honest with the person and just tell them how you feel, it would have avoided all these issues. And also I remember another thing that happened was we had like all these like sleepovers, and it was really cool. But one thing that I always did was I would go to my friend's house and be obsessed with using their internet, because I had very little time on the internet at home sometimes. Like, it was like a rare occurrence where I had time on the internet. So whenever I went to someone's house, I stupidly just like used their internet like crazy. Like, I just almost like ditch the friend and use the internet instead. So imagine like your friend comes over and you want to spend time with them and all they want to do is use your computer. I was not being very nice there, right? But she just, I know she had trouble telling me that, so what ended up happening is she sent me this text message that sounded like she was talking to her other friend. It's like, what a waste of time, her coming over. It was all like a waste of time. Didn't even want to talk to me. And then I just remember we got into the biggest argument over that because of the way it was done. It's just all this silly drama happening in our youth. Just, it's just so silly. Like, I think about it now, I'm just like, oh God, like if only we were able to just be honest with each other and talk about it directly, because if we were able to be honest, we would have just probably been able to talk about it and go, okay, I know how you feel. I'm like, I you know, just be able to fix it much easier rather than like just find these crazy ways of telling the other person how disappointed. It's just so funny when I think back on it. And yeah, it's like, I do remember I was being a total like, just like not very nice when I went to the friend's house and just decided to ditch her and use the internet, right? When you think about it, that's not something that anyone would want to experience when their friend comes over. It's like so anyway, that's kind of I kind of got a bit off topic. That's not so much jealousy as much as just being able to be truthful about how you feel, but jealousy is also in there too. So like a lot of times I find if we were only able to be a little more honest with maybe that friend, if you feel a bit left out or you feel like they're paying more attention to the other person, I honestly don't believe they're doing it intentionally. They're not like intentionally. It could just be the vibe you're giving. It could be that because you feel like insecure, you don't want to like really make an attempt to talk, and they get that feeling. They know that you're not interested, so they're like maybe just won't put in as much effort to talk to you back. So you know, it's like a lot of times you just have to realize how the other person might be what that other person might be going through, rather than just think, oh, they hate me, because that thought is like the most toxic thought that you could ever have, and it's the cause of all jealousy and all these insecurity, is that core idea that you are wrong. And I want to get more to how we can overcome that, or what are some steps we can do to kind of make you feel like, you know, you're worthy in some ways and it's not as bad as what you think, and people are not going to just want to leave you without any reason, or like just because someone else is better than you. I really do want to touch on that because it's so important to realize how we can think in a way that doesn't come up with like that solution. Like, and one of the things that I find very helpful is to kind of imagine yourself in another person's point of view, and you have to actually, like, it's almost like you feel like you need to astral project yourself. You have to get out of your own body. You have to be that person that's looking at you, and you have to imagine yourself as someone else. Preferably someone you really care about, and try to think about it like, you know, almost like a walk a mile in the other person's shoe kind of way. So you're thinking about, you're trying to think of it from a different point of view, and that's really helpful because that's sometimes the only way you can actually just see the situation in a new light, in a non-biased way, because we're often biased against ourselves. I'll say that over and over. We will put these weird and crazy expectations on ourselves that we don't do for anyone else. So you just have to kind of look at yourself from a different point of view. If it's still something you think, if it's that person is not you but someone that you really love, would you still feel that way? You have to think about it that way. And that's one of the ways that I find very helpful to kind of try to challenge myself. That's a word I could say. Challenge myself with my jealousy and my insecurity. Is that, hey, if I was like this other person, I wasn't talking to me, and I was like this, this person. I don't know. I'm not saying. I'm making sense now. Imagine if I was like a person that I cared about, and I was like sitting on the outside and talking to that person. Would I really feel the same way or different? You have to keep practicing that. That's important. The important thing is to keep practicing that way of thinking. You can't just do it once and say, oh, that's gonna be all it takes. It's gonna be great from now on. I'll never be jealous again. That's not gonna work that way. It does take a lot of work, because you're thinking about all these days and years of your life that built this connection to think that you're not worthy, and now you're trying to change it. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time, but it is something. It's just like exercising, doing training. It's like that. You have to train your muscles in your mind to work in a certain way, or whatever connection it is. Yeah, you have to train it. You have to keep doing it, and that's important, because and also what I find really helpful is to get someone else to also help you along with it, so you can discuss it together. You can try to just challenge your way of thinking together. It's really helpful when you can acknowledge that you're jealous. It's really not that big of a deal to acknowledge that you're jealous. I know a lot of people don't like to admit that they're jealous, and to them it's like a weakness or sign of weakness, or sign of that you're just, I don't know, it just feels like a shameful thing to admit. But I think it's very, very useful and good, and really good for both parties if you can admit that you're jealous. It's like admitting you're jealous, I feel like, is the very first step to actually being able to do something about it. You have to be aware and admit it. I understand that a lot of times admitting you're jealous is hard. Like what I'm doing right now, it is a little bit scary, because you're always worried, what if you get judgment for it? What if people think you're just psycho or something? What if people will just call you stuff because of your jealousy? And I just have to say this. It's probably they probably do have moments they're jealous as well, and would they be willing to share it too? And just keep in mind that it always, for some people, it always makes themselves feel better if they can put someone else down. Especially if they're also in a very bad place. Think about it, when you're in a really bad place, you just want to feel better about yourself, and what better way to do that rather than to say, oh, look at how stupid you are for being jealous, and then you still, oh, okay, because they're so horrible, I feel better. That's just the mindset of a lot of times. What happens is when you get judged for it. So you just have to remember that it's okay to admit it, and don't worry so much about the people who are judging you for it, because they can judge all they want, but that's just how I'm feeling. And I know myself that the jealousy doesn't make me a bad person. It doesn't make me weak or horrible. That's just how my brain is for certain situations, and I'm doing my best to overcome it. I'm not going to allow that jealousy to define me, or just make me do things that are that I don't think is good to do. So it's very important for me, at least, that I feel, is to admit that you're jealous. I know it's I've seen shows where it's the character doesn't want to admit they're jealous, and then they die before they admit. And it's just so interesting, because I don't know, I guess I've done it for so long that I'm very, very used to admitting it, that when I get jealous, I just feel yeah, I'm really jealous. It's so I find that just very helpful. It actually makes the other person more aware of it as well, and makes them kind of speak more about, oh, why are you jealous? What's causing it? Rather than a lot of times, if you're accusing them, if you're jealous and you're accusing them of so and so, what's end up happening is the argument will become defensive. So the other person will be oh, I'm not like this, and you end up arguing over just them being defensive about what they're doing, and you're just accusing, and everything is just out of control. But when you find that the conversation can change from the accusing conversation to more of a let me help you conversation, that's when things start happening, and you'll find it's so much easier to manage. So if you're feeling insecure and that you just like, or you're really stupid or dumb or whatever, I want you to try to get to know yourself more, because a lot of times also, this is very, very big for me, that a lot of times I find that I don't know myself the way I think I do. Like, I don't even know how I look when I'm happy. I don't even know how I sound when I'm laughing. Like, how sad is that we spend all our lives with our eyes looking forward and we don't see how we look like from the outside. So what we see is never going to be how someone else sees, because they'll see it like in the way that, you know, they'll see you, but you see them. So it's very, very strange when you think about it. You're not going to see them in the same way. So what better way to get to know yourself more is to actually see yourself the way others see you. And what I mean by that is try to film yourself. That I really feel like that is a really thing that makes a big difference. And then you have to, guess what, expose yourself to your own videos over and over and over until you get used to it. And believe me, in the beginning it could be very cringy, it'd be very hard. Hearing your voice is going to make you feel really and you're just going to be wanting to turn it off or like just escape or something. But I guarantee if you do it over and over and over, you'll start to get to know yourself in a way that you've never before, and you might even like certain things about yourself that you never realized. Like, you might think that you're pretty funny after all. Like, sometimes that's happened to me, where I'll be like, you know, filming my videos, I don't realize how I sound or look at the time, but as when I go back and watch it again, I'm laughing at my own stupid comments. I'm like, oh, I'm actually sometimes funnier than I thought. You know how wonderful it is if you can discover things about yourself that you didn't know by filming yourself and just being able to actually get to know yourself like how others do. Because I feel like in a video you're watching yourself like the way others would see you, because you're seeing your expressions, you're seeing everything that happens when you are happy and when you're like telling a joke, or when when you're talking to someone, you get to see it in a whole new light. And a lot of times I feel like we are so negative or fear what we look like because we have this image of how we look like and we don't actually know for real. So we have to just practice it. We have to be exposed to it again and again for us to actually get a better idea of how we are sounding. So I do recommend that. Even if you don't want to share it with the world, that's fine. Like, you just watch it yourself. Like, make home videos or something. I find that so helpful. That's a really big game changer for me ever since I started filming my videos and watching them, and just being okay with like imperfections as well. Like, sometimes, like, I've got so used to it that I don't mind as much when I have these things on my face. Like, oh, before I know, it's like if I have a pimple, I just feel so ugly. Like, my self-consciousness is like, oh god, I feel so ugly. But when I watch my own videos, sometimes I realize that like I have this pimple, but it doesn't look nearly as bad as I thought. So like, I just a little spot there. It's not like, oh my god, it's completely ruined my image. And that reminds me of like the shows that I used to watch. And it's funny because it just reminds me of like, there's all these, like, I watch a lot of shows that like sometimes this lady will get this cut in her face, right? It's like somehow she gets a scar and a cut, and like before she gets a cut, she's known as the most beautiful woman, right? And then after they get cut, the scar, everyone refers to her as the ugliest person on earth. And I'm just like, how does that even work? It's just like this thing of, it's like it just makes no sense. The show like makes no sense. There's even like a meme about it, about how like the most beautiful, gorgeous beauty, and then have one scar across the face and suddenly they're the ugliest. Like, how does that even work? It's really not, it's, I think a lot of times that kind of mentality is really just in your mind. So you just have to get used to more of how you look and sound. Like, so you don't even realize that you might enjoy the way you look or sound if you get used to it more. Like, it just takes some time to get exposed to it, to get used to it. You really just have to get used to yourself. Like, sometimes it's crazy that I'll look back on some of my videos now and I'm like, oh, I actually like the way I'm talking. Oh, I think I'm actually interesting when I'm talking. That's something I've never ever dealt with before, and I don't even know how I feel about the fact that I think that. It's like, what is this? Like, what's going on here? What? I actually like the way I sound? What? Like, to me, it's such a weird concept. Even now, to think that I actually don't hate the way I sound as much. Like, you know, it's like, And you'll find that as you get to know yourself more, slowly your mind will start to see that as a new reality. So instead of like automatically assuming that you're this ugly person when you're speaking, you'll see how you look when you're in the video. So you'll be like, oh, so this is how I must be looking. And that sometimes can really improve your self-image. And when your self-image improves, guess what? All the jealousy will go down a bit more. So like self-image, jealousy. You want your self-image to climb up and your jealousy to go down. That's what you want. And yes, I just truly believe that you got to consume positive content and things like that. And if for some reason you have someone in your life that is causing you a lot of negative self-esteem, like they might be saying stuff to you that makes you feel bad, like sometimes people will do that. I've had people in my life who's like just made really bad comments about me, like when we're talking, they'll just kind of like throw in like, oh, you're just so stupid or something, like, just silly things like that, or that they're just putting you down, and you can kind of almost feel that they're doing that to make themselves feel better almost sometimes. Like it could be even as bad as you have family members who do that, and that's when I feel like you absolutely need to get yourself out of that situation as much as possible to expose yourself to as little of that negativity as you can, because you'll find that as long as one day you got that negativity in your life, it's going to hinder all your progress and all what you're working on to better yourself. So that's very, very important. I totally, absolutely believe that you have to cut out as much of that negativity as possible. And it's hard if it's a family member. Sometimes it's very hard, but it has to be done, because if it doesn't, you'll never actually progress, because you'll always have this battle in your mind, like, oh, this is what that person thinks, but this is what this person thinks. Who am I going to believe? It's hard, and your mind is always going to want you to be safer, so it's going to cause that discomfort or bad feeling whenever you're told bad things. So just take that as a sign that you have to get out of that situation. I really, truly believe that. Like, if you're being told by someone that you're not worthy or anything like that, you need to get out of that situation. And I know sometimes it can be hard, but just please promise me that you're going to work towards it. It'll just be so, so important for that, because yeah, I just truly believe that when I was in a situation where I was told it, and unfortunately for me, it's like a lot of times I feel like the person who sometimes would cause this negative self-esteem is the person that I care about, and it's like a family member that I care about. But they're not intentionally trying to do that. Sometimes they do that because they care and they want me to be the best, but they think that the way they're doing it is by motivating me negatively, by saying, oh, like, you're gonna turn out horrible if you do this. And you just have to kind of like distance yourself a little bit and to get out of that situation. So sometimes you just have to acknowledge and just spend less time with a person who might just kind of make you feel like you're not as good, and spend more time with people who make you feel happy and good about yourself, because there's definitely a lot more people out there that can do that for you. Don't feel like you have to hang around people who make you feel stupid or horrible. That's going to absolutely not be any good in your life. So I think that's all I have for today about jealousy and stuff. So yeah, it's a very interesting topic for me, because jealousy is something that I've suffered from for a long time. And if you've had problems with jealousy, please let me know what are the signs, like what ticks you off, because for me, it really is like sometimes it could be someone telling a humorous joke that will make me feel like I'm just not funny or something like that. And it's so silly when you think about it, because there should be abundance everywhere. Like, just because you see one funny thing, it doesn't mean everything else is not funny, right? Just because you see one good thing, it doesn't mean everything else sucks. So you have to think in a abundant way rather than a scarcity mindset. It's just so important. And just keep consuming positive stuff. It will help you. So hopefully you have a really, really wonderful day. Stay wonderful, and if you like what you hear, please subscribe, because I will post more things about mindset, positive mindset.